Once there was a family of bears who lived in a cozy den in the middle of the shady woods on the side of a tall mountain. Their den was deep and warm and snug, just the way they liked it. Next to their den was a grassy meadow surrounded by leafy trees. A gentle river ran through these woods and alongside of the meadow, with clear water that bounced and bubbled along. Not far away, just a bit upriver, there was a waterfall here. Water sprayed and sprinkled down from the rocks above, raining into a pool in the river below. The sun shone on the spray from this waterfall and formed rainbows in the fresh mountain air. Every day the little bears would run through the meadow and the woods, climb the trees and explore the rocks and plants of the mountainside around their den. Most of all, the bears dearly loved to splash and swim in the river on warm, sunny days. They would duck their heads into the spray from the waterfall and pull them out again, watching the rainbows twinkle in the mist. One warm and sunshiny morning, the little bears had been playing for a very long time in their favourite small pool by the waterfall. They were wet and tired and happy, and at last they decided to head home for lunch. They walked up the gentle river and through the woods. The green leaves of the trees shaded the ground, and patches of sunlight danced on the forest floor between the shadows. Together they tramped along to the grassy meadow next to their cozy den. The sounds of the waterfall followed them as they headed home. Their fur was pleasantly damp after their swim, and the warm sun felt nice on their skin. Butterflies swooped and flitted over the grass. The bright colours of their wings glimmered in the sunlight. A bird called from a treetop nearby. It was a funny chirping sound. Another bird answered from not far away. The bears laughed as the birds called back and forth because they sounded just like they were talking to each other. Now there were actually 4 little bears in the bear family, 2 sisters and 2 brothers. 3 were a little older and 1 was still very young, and they were the best of friends. That's not to say they never argued. Oh no, they were experts at disagreeing over the smallest things. And that's also not to say they never bothered anyone, but they had fun together. So very much fun when they arrived at the den that sunny morning. Mother Bear was just stepping outside when she saw her little bears. She smiled warm L at them, but they could see something was worrying her. She helped them dry their damp fur with soft towels. As she did, the oldest little bear asked her what was wrong. Mother Bear explained that their neighbour in the den across the way wasn't feeling very well, but there was something that would help the fruit of a rare tree, but it could only be found on the other side of the mountain. Mother Bear couldn't go off to get the fruit, as she had to care for their littlest sister, who was just a tiny baby. And she also wanted to stay near the den in case the neighbour needed anything. But if only she could find a way to get the fruit, the neighbour would be all better. That was why she was worried. "Oh, Mother will get the fruit for you, said one of the little bears, and the others agreed. "We know our mountain well. We run and climb and play on it every day. We can go to the other side of the mountain and bring back the fruit. If only you will tell us what to look for." This was true. Her little ones knew the mountainside well. She saw that they were strong and brave and careful. She watched as they ran, jumped, climbed and explored all around their home every day. So she agreed that they could go on a journey to get the fruit from the distant tree to make their neighbour feel better. And she told them what to do. They must walk through the grassy meadow and the shady woods, then up the mountainside above their cozy den. They must go up towards the top of the tall mountain. When they reached the peak, they should go straight down the other side. They would see a big rock. They would pass a tall tree with a bird's nest at the top. Standing alone near the peak, after a bit, they would reach more shady woods. They must walk through those trees until they found another gentle river that bounced and bubbled just like the one nearby. And then they must follow that other river until they came to a small clearing, an opening in the woods that was surrounded on all sides by trees. In the very middle of this clearing, they would see one tree that was different from all the rest. This tree would be big and strong and beautiful. Its branches would stretch wide around it, forming a ring of shade below its leaves would be the brightest green, and its branches would be dotted with lovely pink fruit. The little bears must pick some of these fruits and bring them carefully back to their cozy den where Mother Bear would be waiting. The little bears listened carefully to all their mother told them, and then they promised to do just as she said. Now it was time for the bears. To prepare for their journey, they took 3 clean cloths and spread them out. They put nuts and berries into the middle of each one. Then they picked up the corners of their cloths and pulled them together. They tied them snugly, making 3 bundles that held their snacks. Then they walked a short way into the woods and each found a long, sturdy stick. They put the ends of their sticks through the knots on their bundles, and they carried them over their shoulders. The bundles swung gently back and forth as they walked. Then the 3 little bears kissed their mother goodbye and started on their journey per se. They walked through the grassy meadow. The butterflies swooped, the sun shone, and the birds called. But the little bears did not stop. They continued on their way, for they knew that their neighbor and their mother were relying on them. They entered the shady woods and walked through the trees. The green leaves cast shadows on the ground, cooling the little bears as they tramped uphill patches of sunlight, dancing on the forest floor beneath the shadows. But still the little bears did not stop on. They walked through the woods and out into the sunshine once more. They clambered up the mountainside above their cozy den, up. They walked towards the top of the tall mountain. There were no more trees here, just short, scrubby bushes that grew all around them. The sun shone at full strength as they continued going up, and they began to feel warm, but a fresh mountain breeze blew softly over them as they went higher and higher. Soon the bushes gave way to rocks as they got closer to the top of the mountain. Everything from giant rocks to tiny pebbles covered the ground around them. The bears knew how to walk carefully on small, loose rocks and have all to climb wisely over the large ones. On another day, they would have dearly loved to climb the very biggest rocks and then jump lightly to the ground. But not today. They knew their neighbor was counting on them, and their mother was expecting them back soon. And so they walked strong and careful and brave, climbing towards the top of the mountain, and then they reached it. They paused for a moment to look around. The breeze blew stronger now, and it ruffled their fur. They stood still for a moment, taking deep breaths at the fresh, cool air. They looked out over the side of the mountain, down past the rocks below, down past the short and scrubby bushes, down over the leafy trees of the shady woods, all the way to their very own grassy meadow, where they knew Mother Bear was waiting for them in their cozy den. Then they looked up and out into the wide blue sky. They turned slowly in a circle, and the blue sky stretched out in every direction as the mountain fell away below them. On every side, the little bears felt as though they were on top of the world, but they didn't stay too long enjoying the view. Instead, they turned to peer down the other side, where they would find the fruit of the tree that would make their neighbor feel better again. "Come," said the little bears to one another. And they began on their way once more, eager to explore this new side of the mountain. They scrambled with care over the rocks and pebbles that also covered the mountaintop on this side down. They went before long. They saw a big rock, just as their mother had said they would on another day. They would have loved to stop and climb this big rock too, but not today. So on they walked just past the big rock. They came to a tall tree with a bird's nest at the very top. Now the breeze was softer and the sun felt warmer, and the little bears began to feel thirsty. They looked forward to entering the woods ahead and to finding the gentle river that their mother said flowed here too. Their short legs were beginning to grow tired, but they still walked on brave and strong. And just ahead they saw the shady woods, very much like the ones that stood on their side of the mountain, just like Mama Bear had told him they would. Thankfully, they made their way into the shade. Here, patches of sunlight danced between the shadows, just like their woods back home. It helped to cool them down, and the little bears walked on. Soon they found another gentle river that bounced and bubbled through the woods, just like their own river. Back home here, the little bears set down their sticks with their bundles and kneeled by the gentle river. They put their paws in the cool water and splashed it onto their warm and dusty faces. Then they scooped the water into their paws and drank it. It was sweet and fresh and made them smile. The little bears drank the nice cool water until they could drink no more. They felt so happy and thankful for this gentle, clean river. In these shady woods, their legs didn't feel so worn out now, so they stood and took up their sticks and bundles again. The water had given them new energy, and they walked on a bit faster now. They remembered what their mother had told them, and so they did, just as she said. They followed this new, gentle river walking along its banks, which led them through the woods. After a short while, they came to a small clearing, an open area with trees standing all around it. In the very middle, they saw one tree that was different from all the rest. It was big and strong and beautiful. Its branches stretched wide around it, forming a ring of shade beneath it. Its leaves were the brightest shade of green, and its branches were dotted all around with fruit of the loveliest pink. So the three little bears walked into the center of the small clearing again. They sat down their sticks and bundles, this time in the shade of the beautiful tree. They gazed up over their heads into the wide branches and bright green leaves of this tree that was different from all the others, and they wondered, how should they get the fruit? Should they reach up with the sticks from their bundles and try to knock some free? No, they were just a bit too high for that. Should they throw something up to knock down some fruit? No, that wouldn't work either, and it might smash the fruit. They would have to climb. This was no problem, for little bears are very good at climbing. They are also very careful when they climb up or over things like rocks and trees. They know all about holding on and testing branches to see if they'll hold their weight, and never letting go with both hands or doing anything silly like that. The only problem was this tree was so big, the first branch was up above their heads where they couldn't reach it. Not even the tallest, oldest little bear. So how could they get to the lovely pink fruit? The little bears looked and thought and looked and thought some more, and soon they came up with a solution. The biggest bear would lift up the littlest bear until he could reach the first branch above. They all agreed that this was a good plan, so the big sister lifted up the little brother onto her shoulders. He reached up and grasped the branch carefully. He pulled himself onto it. Then he held on the tree with one arm while he reached up with the other and picked a lovely pink fruit that grew just above his head. He tossed the fruit to his sister gently so it wouldn't smash. She caught the fruit and gave it to her brother, who sat it down on the ground in the shade of the tree. Then the littlest bear picked another fruit and another, tossing each down to his siblings below. When he had picked 4 of the lovely pink fruits, the little bear climbed down into the waiting arms of his big sister, and she lovingly set him down on the ground. But then the bears realized they were feeling hungry. They couldn't eat the fruit, though they had to save it for their neighbor, so instead they untied the bundles that hung from their sticks and opened up the cloths. They took out the nuts and berries that they'd packed inside, and they ate their snack in the shade of the big, strong tree. Afterwards, the little bears placed the precious fruit inside their cloths, one in each. Then they tied the corners together again, and they poked the ends of their sticks through the knots so they could easily carry the bundles over their shoulders. Then the little bears stood up. They were ready to head back to their cozy den, where their mother would be waiting for them. They left the big and strong and beautiful tree that was different from all the others. They walked along the small clearing and back into the shady woods that were so like their own. On the other side of the mountain, here they stooped down again and drank the sweet, cool water of the gentle river. Then they followed the bouncing, bubbling water through the trees. They followed it up the mountainside until they came out of the shady woods, into the sunshine where no more trees grew, but the light was softer now and the sun was lower in the sky. It was getting to be late in the afternoon. Soon the air would grow cooler as the evening time came closer. But for now, the air was still warm on their skin. On walked the little bears up the mountain and over the rocks. They passed the tall tree with the bird's nest, which stood alone near the peak. Then they passed the big rock, and still onwards they walked, carrying their bundles with the precious pink fruit just as carefully as they could, until they came once more to the very top of the tall mountain. Here they paused as they had before and let the soft breeze blow over them. They took big breaths of the fresh mountain air as they gazed out again into the blue sky, stretching away all around them. Then they looked down on their very own side of the mountain. They saw the rocks and the scrubby bushes. They saw the trees of their very own shady woods. They looked all the way down to the meadow with their own cozy den, where their mother was waiting for them, and then they kept walking home. They climbed down over the rocks and made their way through the short, scrubby bushes. They walked and walked until they reached the edge of their own shady woods. And just as the sun was getting so low in the sky that the air was starting to feel like evening, they arrived at the trees they knew so well. They walked through this familiar place where the green leaves cast long shadows on the ground, and patches of late-day sunshine still danced here and there between the shadows. They'd had a wonderful adventure, but now they were filled with joy to be back in their own beautiful woods, walking beside their own gentle river. And soon they were arriving at their very own grassy meadow, where the butterflies were swooping and the birds were calling. And they walked right through that grassy meadow to their own cozy den, where they found their mother waiting for them, just as they knew she would be. She took their bundles from them, the precious fruit still wrapped safely inside, and set them gently on the floor of the den. Then Mother Bear gathered her little bears into her soft big arms and hugged them close as she hugged them. Mother Bear whispered in their ears. She told them how proud she was of them. She praised them for being so brave and kind and never giving up. Then she helped her little bears get ready for bed and tucked them in just as snug as could be deep inside their warm, cozy den. And as she went off to take the fruit to their neighbour, the tired little bears drifted right off to sleep. And as they slept, they dreamed of their next big adventure good night.